Well, hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. So for those of you that attended live, you know that we had some technical issues. A tornado came through where Sabrina lives. We had some computer issues. All three of us actually managed to have tech issues, which was interesting. But so we have come together. I am here with Michael Gilbert and Sabrina Thomas. We are going to record this webinar for you. If you're getting this recording, it means that you signed up for the webinar. And if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. You missed the first fun when we had some tech issues, but we did have the first time 18 people come on. They got to ask Michael their questions, which was really awesome. And Sabrina, we had some tech issues with Sabrina, but they got to ask Michael their personal questions. So we're glad we got those answered for you. But we are now going to go through really helping parents to understand your child's IEP rights during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of kids right now are not getting services, and a lot of kids, even if school districts are doing their best, and I think that most school districts really are doing their best, a lot of kids' struggles do not necessarily lean themselves towards doing everything at home and doing teletherapy. I'm doing teletherapy. In some cases, it's really effective, but you can't do social skills training over teletherapy, right? Or you might be limited in what you can do. So we're going to really help you today as a parent to understand what your child's rights are today in, I think it's April 27th, 2020, what your rights are as of today. The laws have potentially could change. So this is current information as of April 27th, 2020. So I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. If you don't know who I am, my name is Jessica Leichtweisz. I'm the CEO of Hope Education Services. I help kids and families that are affected by autism. I am classically trained in behavior analysis, but I use a lot of different modalities. I come from a little bit different perspective than people who use a traditional behavior approach. I am trained in classic ABA therapy, and I do classic ABA therapy, but I take a very holistic approach to helping children. So I have 4 core values in my company, and they're really important to me. The first is autism awareness. If you're here as a parent, whether your child's autistic or not, you're doing everything you can to help your child. And I believe that the kids who succeed the most and who benefit the most from education are the ones whose parents are most involved. The second thing I'm big on is different, not less. The idea that a child who has special needs, they are different than other kids, but they're not any less important or less valuable than other kids, and their needs are not any less important. I also believe in collaboration. You'll see that because I have other people here with me, right? You can check out my YouTube channel, getautismanswers.com. You'll see that I bring on occupational therapists, speech therapists, play therapists, recreational therapists, you name it, parent advocates, special education attorneys, chiropractors. I bring on everyone because I know it takes a village, and I want to make sure that I'm bringing the village to you as a family. And then the fourth thing is this really a family-centered approach. I believe that it's a family, not a child, that gets a diagnosis of special needs and that it affects everyone. So we're here today to support you, and I'm really excited to be able to bring some guests on today. So the first person we're going to hear from, his name is Michael Gilbert. Michael is an amazing individual. Michael was diagnosed as autistic when he was 18 years old, and he felt like his education, that he didn't get the education he deserved. And a lot of people, when things like that happen to them, they blame the system, they blame the government, and they take on this victim mentality, and they don't go on to accomplish great things. Michael's not one of those people. Michael decided he was—
I blame the system a little and did have some victim mentality.
A little bit, but everyone has some sort of victim mentality. But Michael decided he was going to thrive despite the system, and he went on to get a degree from law school. He became a lawyer, and now he's passionate about making sure kids get the best education possible. So it's really exciting to have him on here. Not only is he able to help you from a professional perspective, but also brings that human perspective of what it was like to not get the education that he deserved to have. So my second guest is Sabrina Thomas. She's a mom of 2 boys, one who is autistic, and she really learned a lot about how to help her son. She had to. And she helps parents now. She coaches them. She's an IEP coach, a parent advocate. We know this process is hard and it's confusing. And we want to believe that every school district has the best interests of children at heart, and that every school district doesn't do everything that they can to help every child. And I Fortunately, most of the school districts I work with are really good, but we also know as parents that you have to be your child's advocate, and that not every person is in a situation where the school district is doing their best to help them. So we're going to help make sure today you're prepared during this time. It's really difficult. I think nobody knows exactly what's going on, and even none of us know exactly what's going on. Like I said, things are changing on a day-to-day basis, but we're going to do our best to help you and serve you and give you some of the answers you're looking for. Michael's going to talk a little bit about what your child's IDA rights are, what that means for today, and then Sabrina's going to talk about preparing for an IEP meeting, especially if it's going to be a tele-therapy meeting. This is the season, right, where school districts are all having meetings for next year. A lot of parents are going through IEP meetings right now, and a lot of them are via tele-IEP meetings. And a lot of parents don't understand what that means. A lot of schools are not doing assessments, so we're going to get into what your rights are for that. So, Michael, if you wanted to start off today for what we're going to talk about, what right now parents need to understand really where their child's rights come from. And their children's rights come from the IDEA. So can you explain to us a little bit about what that is and what it implies for what children's rights are during this pandemic?
Sure. IDEA is the federal law governing special education. It's the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's a 40-plus-year-old statute that's been amended a few times, and it basically is the law that says your child is entitled to what's a free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. Now, most of the time what attorneys like myself do is we fight with the school districts over what the definition of appropriate is, because everybody has a different definition of appropriate. Everybody has a different definition of what a child's progress is. As you alluded to my story, when I was a child, they said I couldn't be educated, which was obviously not true. And very often school districts will say this child is uneducable, which is not the case. If a child's nonverbal or a child has lower IQ, they'll try to say they can't educate the child instead of looking for ways to do it. Now, under the pandemic situation we're in now, IDEA has not been waived. There's some misinformation out there that people think parts of IDEA have been waived. It hasn't. There has been discussion of waivers of provisions of IDEA. The Secretary of Education is supposed to recommend to Congress provisions to be waived, but nothing has officially been waived. COPA, which is the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, which is the national professional organization of attorneys and advocates representing families in special ed. I'm on their board. COPA is definitely fighting that and making sure things are not waived. And so right now, nothing is waived. The school still has to offer an appropriate education to every student via distance learning. And now it's harder. And I tell parents you have to make some allowances for the situation and you have to work with them. But it doesn't nothing absolves the school districts of their current responsibilities to provide your child's educational services under the IDEA as of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the things, I'm encouraged about is that I'm doing teletherapy and it is going very well for some children. But for some children, it's also not going well. Fortunately, none of my kids, but I have heard that there's families where they're really struggling. And the other thing is that parents are not necessarily equipped to be able to provide children with their education. And let's just look at if a child's in middle school. And I think this is what a lot of parents are questioning. I don't know how to do middle school math, and I have a master's degree. So if my child was home, I have a fur child and he's sleeping on the couch, but if I had a child that I was now forced to teach them to do, I failed geometry in high school. So geometry, let's say, I think that's like freshman year of high school, I failed that. I probably wouldn't be able to do that. And parents don't really know what to do because parents are not equipped. And I spent years studying how to help kids, and every year I get better at it. And even just recently, I was looking at my blog posts and I re-updated a lot of them, thinking, I've grown professionally since I've written these. Parents don't have that professional experience with teaching. And Sabrina, this may be a question for you. Mm-hmm. What are parents supposed to do? And how do we define appropriate in this situation? Because I think everyone would agree, nothing about this situation in general feels appropriate. It doesn't feel appropriate to wait online at the grocery store. It doesn't feel appropriate that we can't order toilet paper. And nothing about this feels appropriate. So how do we give a child an appropriate education with everything going on?
Well, for me, I'm gonna tell you my personal experience. My son is in the 12th grade, and like you said, you have a master's degree, and there's some things that you just can't do. I'm a parent, and I have an education, but I'm not trained to teach my son, the way he needs to be taught because, he is in a special education class. He does have autism, and he has cerebral palsy as well as an intellectual disability. So his teachers are trained to teach him in a certain way that I know for a fact that I'm trying my best. I'm doing the best that I can, but it's not the same. First of all, you're not supposed to be teaching. Children are not used to having their education taught in the living room, in the kitchen, and in the dining room space. But what I have learned, I am very in close contact with the teachers, and what they're doing now. Actually, they started it this morning. What they're doing now is I log in 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning with the teachers, and they are actually doing the Zoom, and they're actually doing the teaching. Now, a couple of weeks prior, up until today, they weren't doing that. They were emailing me the homework and telling me, hey, this is what you need to do. Send us the homework and we'll grade it. But I'm like calling her, emailing her, and I'm like, I don't know how to tell him how to do this. I don't know. So she was working with me the best she could, and she was getting frustrated because I'm frustrated, and Omar's looking at me like, what are you doing? He's kind of like, he's nonverbal, but he's kind of looking at me like, what do you want me to do? So I think right now everybody is frustrated, and the only thing I can say is, for me, I'm trying to be the calm in the storm. My son is frustrated. The teachers are frustrated. They're not used to doing this, as well. So I'm doing the best I can to work with my son's teachers. And I like the fact that today he logged in and I sat next to him, but she actually taught the class, just like you're, doing this, interview. She's actually teaching him, and he's listening to her, and he's doing the work, which is helping me learn how she is going to teach him. So every time that they meet up, I'm going to watch her, see what she does, see how the flow goes, and I'm going to incorporate that as far as, getting the homework done, because she just taught the class. When the class was over, I still have to show him how to do the homework. But we're just doing the best that we can. I mean, this is the only thing that we can do. It's the best that we can, and everybody has to be flexible.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think some parents have to be understanding. And I've seen some cases where parents want everything that they were getting in school, and that's not realistic today. It's not going to happen today. And Michael will talk a little bit about potentially getting your child compensatory services once this is over, but it's not realistic today.
No,
but what I think the difficulty is that this is creating an even greater disparity in education for children. Because some parents are working full-time from home, and they don't have the option to sit and tutor their children because they have to work, and then some children don't have access to technology. So some school districts are providing laptops or Chromebooks or iPads or whatever, and some districts are not. So I have heard of children who have the option to receive teletherapy. Now, this is not education. I'm talking about teleservices, something like NAVA or speech or occupational therapy, but they don't have a device to do it on, and they're not being provided that. So it's creating an even greater disparity. So Michael, what should parents be doing? And I know number one thing I'm telling parents is that a lot of parents have declined services. And I've spoken to them and said, don't formally, if you don't have, if a parent wants to have services and they don't have a device and they're not, a lot of people are not working, financially able to go out and buy an iPad and spend $1,000 right now. Michael, what would you tell them? I know, we talked about, the first most important thing is don't sign anything declining services.
I always say that you should never decline services. That's just a bad idea. That gives you them leverage later to say, well, you decline them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what should a parent do if they want to, I was under the assumption that if a child is entitled to services under their IEP and they require technology for that, they should be provided with that technology in order to carry out the services.
That's what I thought as well.
I've had districts where most parents have a laptop or an iPad for the kids, but if they don't, the districts are trying, or supposed to be, to find those laptops or iPads.
Yeah, and I think that like probably Michael and I'm just going to be totally blunt, that the most parents that come to you probably do, because if a parent has the money to hire an attorney, they
Yes
probably
and
have
no, because I get
to buy
parents
an iPad.
who come to
But
me who are given grants to hire an attorney, and so they're lower income.
Oh,
okay, but I
And
do
so,
know a lot of parents don't have access to, or a parent has one laptop and they're using it to work, so their child can't use it to go to school. And I've seen a lot of situations where that's happening as well.
right. I mean, in an
So,
ideal world, the child will have their own laptop, but also you have the issue that the child, if they're too young, can't really use the computer on their own.
yeah, absolutely.
That's what. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah,
think of that.
absolutely. So I'm doing some early intervention work, and fortunately, the parents I work with are wonderful, and they're sitting with the kids, and it's going really well. But obviously, a 2-year-old can't figure out how to navigate a computer instead of a Zoom meeting. So what should parents be doing right now if they're not getting their services? So right now, kids are entitled to their services. Now, that may look different, right? So speech therapy might be done on Zoom as opposed to being done one-on-one, right? And even like a social skills training. I'm doing social skills training with kids, with teenagers, and right now it looks like having a group chat in a Zoom meeting and playing chess and checkers and playing games electronically, because that's the best we can do. So, but there are some districts, from what I heard, and that families have been reaching out to me saying, my child is entitled to speech therapy, but they're not getting it. Or my child has speech therapy on their IEP 3 times a week for 90 minutes, and they're only getting it once per week for a half hour on Zoom as a consultation, and I never agreed to a decrease. So what should parents be doing if like their children have services on the IEP that the school is not attempting to carry out electronically?
Contact the school, see what they say. If the school says we can't do it, then you tell them that you have a legal right if they continue. Honestly, that's where I think you have to threaten them that you're going to get an attorney or advocate if they're not going to follow through on what they're supposed to.
Okay. But we just wanted to be clear and make it clear for all parents that right now, if a service is on the IEP, the school does not have the option to say, we can't deliver this. They have to figure out a way to deliver it that is the most appropriate, is that legal word, the most appropriate thing that they can do at this time.
Correct. There is no
Michael,
waiver of IDEA obligations at this point. The school has an obligation, and I've heard of a couple of cases where schools are trying to do things like speech by mail, and you can't do that because how do you evaluate a kid's speech patterns by mail?
Yeah. Michael, I do have a question. My son gets speech therapy as well, and like with Jessica, he's doing it via Zoom. Now, he normally gets two times a week, 30 minutes. They decreased it to 20 minutes. 2 times a week. I didn't sign anything. I didn't make a big deal, but I'm bringing this up because it goes back to we all talk about being flexible. So if I'm used to getting 2 times a week, 30 minutes, and they're decreasing it to 15 or 20 minutes, do I not take the 15 or 20 minutes, or do I say, you know what, it's 30 minutes and that's it, and move forward?
Take it and you note it for later, and you remind them of what the IEP time is, how much time is on the IEP, and say that you'll take what they're giving now, but there will be an issue later, because again, the IEP is a legal contract. It's a binding contract.
Yeah. Okay. And that's what I did, because I'm trying to be a little bit flexible with them, because I know that they're on these Zoom calls and they got so many people on these Zoom calls.
Well, and that's what I tell parents. Sorry, Sabrina. That's what I tell parents is you have to understand the school didn't choose this. They're not responsible for the pandemic.
And one of the things too, Sabrina, just to know, because I know parents have asked that same question to me, is that to keep in mind that in a 30-minute time period when your kid is in the classroom, that time to do notes and paperwork and billing and charting, and that's all worked into it. So typically we are allotted 10 to 15 minutes in an hour-long therapy session in order to do notes, because we're required to do notes. So a lot of parents may not even realize that your child may be getting 20 minutes of a 30-minute session, because the speech therapist is required to write notes and chart and document what she's doing anyway. So that it could be, now what I've been doing with all of my families is just scheduling 5 minutes between sessions. So I have time to restart Zoom, and I've just been doing the notes while they're in Zoom. so they can see.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sharing my screen and showing them the notes. I'm sending to them after, but I'm like, that way they can see that I didn't end the session 10 minutes early because I wanted to check Facebook. I ended the session 10 minutes early because I'm required to document the child's progress on their goal towards their IEP every session. So that could be the answer to that question. And that's a great question because a lot of parents have had that question. But a lot of children are getting less services of less frequency right now. So Michael, let's talk a little bit about compensatory services. A lot of parents don't know what that is. And it's going to probably be decided on a court by court basis whether or not children can get compensatory services.
It's not a matter of court by court. Again, it has to do with the IDEA. So there is still that.
So right now, if you can explain to parents what compensatory services are and what the potential for that looks like once this is all over.
I think it's going to be very individualized in each case. I don't think there's going to be a universal, but I think compensatory services are to compensate. Generally, compensatory education is used to compensate for education or services the child was not given that they should have been given.
Right. So let's just say, for example, like timely services. So let's say that your child is found eligible for speech therapy. And the school district, and let's say the speech therapy is going to take place at the home. There's a legal amount of time, and it does vary by state to state, that the school has to find a speech therapist and to have services start. So compensatory services, right, for me is like, if let's say they're 3 weeks behind and your child is getting speech twice a week for 1 hour, and now there are 6 hours that they were entitled to, they didn't get, that a parent could request compensatory services and get those 6 hours made up. Now, there's a lot of states shut down for a period of time. A lot of states just said, like, right now we're closed while we figure out what this is going to look like. A lot of, like you said, parents are not getting services. So what should parents be contacting an attorney now and asking for compensatory services? Should they wait till this is all over? Does it matter if a child is aging out? Like, what if a child is about to graduate high school and next year they're not going to be in high school? Are they still entitled to some sort of compensatory service?
They are entitled, and I think that's going to be something we have to figure out. I think, unfortunately, I hate to say it this way, the children who are seniors and are graduating or aging out this year are in a very bad position.
Yeah.
And there's not much that we can do to solve that, simply because those children are just, the time is against us, and the problem is nobody is responsible for this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I tell clients generally that I would hire the lawyer now so you can get the pieces in place, but I would do the compensatory services after that we return to school, because it's going to be hard to deliver them in a virtual setting. You need to see how it all winds up rather than do a piecemeal as we go. So if you have 3-4 months over the summer where the kid isn't getting services, it's better to figure that all out after the fact than try to do a piece here and a piece there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the last question I've been getting a lot by parents is assessments. So a lot of assessments are not taking place, and a lot of children are just where they normally would have to be reassessed to requalify for a service or a triennial assessment. A lot of schools are just saying, well, we're either going to postpone it or we're just going to waive the assessment and grant the services based upon the word of the practitioner, because we can't do the assessment if the child's not present. What should parents do? Should parents sign something declining assessment? Do you think it's in a parent's best interest to say, okay, like, I want this to continue, so I'll waive this for now? The problem, I think a lot of parents are just signing things that they're being asked to sign without realizing what it means.
I think you shouldn't waive anything. I tell parents, don't waive anything.
Okay. So parents should then say that they want...
Let me rephrase that. Don't waive anything without talking to an attorney or somebody more knowledgeable.
Okay. That makes sense. And so I know one of the tips Sabrina will talk about probably is just even an IEP meeting that you don't have to sign an IEP if you don't agree with it. A lot of parents don't know that. I've had parents that have left the meeting and like, I'm really upset and I'm going to change this, and I look at it and I'm like, oh my goodness, why is your signature on it? And they're like, I didn't know. They just didn't know.
They don't know.
And they said to sign this paper, and I'm like, okay, well, now it's going to be really hard to change because now you agree to it. So just
I always tell parents, parent, is one of the most important jobs in the world and one of the only ones you don't need a license for.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Exactly. All right.
I like that, Michael.
Thank you so much, Michael, for helping us for families to understand their IDEA rights. Like I said, if you're watching the recording of this, it's people who came on. So make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, make sure you get onto my list. So go over to hopeeducationservices.com and sign up for my list, because I have special events like this where anyone who's on my list, they got emailed. And this is a re-recording because of the tech issues, but they got to ask Michael and Sabrina their own personal questions firsthand. So make sure you do get on that list. So Michael, I'm going to go into Sabrina's part now.
Perfect. I will sit here and keep my mouth shut.
All right.
No, Michael, I may need
no,
you.
you're welcome to join. You're welcome to join in. You're welcome to join in. But I'm gonna and if you're watching this in the recording, but I am gonna do this as part 1 and part 2. So parents who want to know about the tele-IEP meeting versus their IDEA rights. But so this will be broken into 2 segments. But Sabrina, so can you give us a little bit about your background of like why it's so important to you? What made you decide to become an IEP coach, and why is this so important for you to empower parents to really be their child's best advocate?
Okay, well, basically, my son is 19, and I'm just like, other parents that are probably watching, the YouTube video, the interview. And years ago, many years ago, I used to sit in IEP meetings, and I used to just sign the paper because I figured I didn't know any better. Just like you said, they don't know they had to sign. I always knew I didn't have to sign, but I just signed it because they said so. They said, this is what we're going to do. This is what should happen. And I'm like, well, I don't really know. It's the teachers, the principals, it's the therapists, it's the principal. I mean, why would they tell me something other than, the stuff that my son needs if it wasn't true? I used to sign the IEPs, and one day, just like Michael said, never do that. And I signed something, and they were like, well, you signed it. And I'm like, well, you told me to. Like, this is what you guys said was best for my son. And come to find out, it wasn't. So after that day, I just figured, okay, I gotta figure out what I'm doing here. I gotta learn what my son needs. I have to be more involved, because I was that parent that just signed the IEP. I wasn't involved. I really didn't know. I didn't even read the IEP, to be honest. I used to get them. They were like 15, 16 pages. I think I looked over the first 2, and I kept going, and I signed it back because I figured that he was, I didn't know what his needs were. And who am I to say he doesn't need this? I just didn't know. And I don't want any parent to be the parent I was. So what I do now is I got clients and I coach them, just like, I got a couple certifications, and, I studied some stuff on VCU. I got a couple of certifications, and I took some classes, and I went through webinars, and I got trained to be a master IEP coach, because I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. I'm in a situation now with my school where we're a team and everything's fine, but I wasn't always in that position that I'm in now because I didn't know any better. And I think parents just don't know. So I just want to be that person that I needed then and I didn't have. I want to be that person for a parent now that I needed 15, 16 years ago when I started with my son IEPs.
And it's amazing. It's amazing that you're doing this. And I think parents need to understand that you're always your child's best advocate. And I have found that most school districts really do have a child's best intentions.
Yes.
And I have found that, like, especially today, 14 years, I started there 12 years ago, and I started this really, 16 years if you count when I was in college doing internships and stuff. But it wasn't necessarily the case 16 years ago. But today I find that, like, most school districts are going above and beyond for kids.
Yeah,
I'm just so impressed with the school districts I work with, especially I'm located in Bergen County, New Jersey, and I have to just say props out to Bergen County. They're really good to kids.
Well, Jessica, really just to cut in, I don't think anybody gets into education with the intention of harming children. I don't think anybody says, I'm going to go into education to hurt children. But I think when you get into the field and money and budgets and parents become a factor, things change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, I do think also today, though, that because there's more kids than ever that have services, more districts are equipped today than ever to provide services for kids. Whereas, like, for example, autism programs, like an ABA-based program 20 years ago, schools really didn't have that.
They didn't have it. They didn't have it.
You had to, as a parent, like really fight for it. And you had to send your kid out of district. I mean, it was crazy to try to get those. I remember even just 10 years ago, the battle to even, and now, you know, and a lot of parents don't even know this, that how hard it was for parents like yourself, whose child is 19. It's taken for granted that almost every school district has one right now.
No.
So, you know, but really parents still, despite the fact that I think we moved in a great direction.
Yes.
And I want to just, you know, kind of state, we're not making this video to be litigious or to kind of say we want to play with the schools. I don't believe in that, right? One of my core values was collaboration. That means a team, the school being a team.
And I want to add that I'm one of those attorneys. I'm known for not being litigious, for collaborating and working to solutions with school board attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's good. That's great, Michael.
Yeah, and that's why we have you on here. So, you know, we're not here to tell you as a parent, you got to fight the school and they're the enemy. No, we want to say, we're going to give you the information you need to know to be the best member of the team as possible.
Yes.
Because you really want to be, your school is your team, they are your support, and they are on your side. But it is also up to you to educate yourself so you also can be the best kind of parent for your child.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit. We made some slides for people to go through, and we'll just go through what parents need to know going into the IEP meetings, and we kind of catered this to tele-IEP meetings because that's what it seems like for the time being most kids are going to be going through.
Mm-hmm. Okay, purpose of the IEP, and Michael touched on this earlier. First, each child is entitled to a free and public education. And basically the purpose of IEP is to meet the child's unique needs, because every child is, you know, they have individual needs, and to prepare them for the future, for their future employment and independent living. That's basically, in a nutshell, what the purpose of the IEP is. Okay, so before the IEP meeting, this is just some basic stuff. Make sure that your device is fully charged. I had that issue the first couple of days, and I lost it on the Zoom call because I didn't charge my cell phone. So it's just simple. Make sure your device is fully charged. Make sure the teacher and school have your current email address and phone number. That's very, very important. And Michael can attest to this, number 3. The laws and regulations are still in place when developing and reviewing an IEP, evaluating a student, and for eligibility as well. Basically, the only thing that has changed is how they're going to meet these requirements. Is that correct, Michael?
Correct. Nothing has been waived. No laws have been waived. There's still a possibility, but as of now, every law is still in place.
Mm-hmm. And number 4, and this is about being flexible. Work with the school to figure out the best way to have an IEP meeting. Some people are good with Zoom, and like Jessica mentioned, some people don't have the computers, and they don't have that the electronic. So I know one of my teachers said her child doesn't, one of her students doesn't have a computer, and they're working on it, but they're doing it via telephone. I mean, that's what they have to do right now. That's not ideal, but she's trying to be flexible until she can get a laptop to her son. But, you know, what's the best, you know, way to have the IEP? Some people don't understand the Zoom. I know I have a elderly, well, I would say elderly. She's a grandparent, and she's taking care of her. I think she's 8, and she doesn't know anything about Zoom. She has a laptop, but it's no good for her because she doesn't know how to click on it and do everything. So she's like, I can't do this, you know? So just work with the school to figure out the best way to have the meeting, and make sure that they get that paperwork to you as well. The same paperwork that you need to have if you were sitting in one of the boardrooms before the IEP is the same paperwork you need right now when you're doing an IEP, an updated IEP virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's the responsibility, and I'm telling therapists this, like, just keep in mind that not all parents are going to be able to use technology. And I'm telling, you know, even therapists, when I'm training therapists on teletherapy and I'm doing teletherapy, I don't use the same platform for all of my families, because I know some families are really good at technology, and I know some families are not. So I'm actually changing my technology depending upon the family's preference. So I would definitely I would also, you know, tell school districts if you don't know how to do something. Like and don't be afraid to ask for instructions on how to do it, you know. And it's like, I imagine some of the parents that are trying to, or like grandparents trying to figure this out. Even my mom called me the other day, and she was telling me, she's like, I can't get it out. I can't get it open. I'm like, what is trying to be open? It? And I'm like, well, what is it? The computer. She's like, the computer, Jessica, it's not opening on the computer. I'm like, well, what's not opening? The email. Why is my email not opening? I'm like, okay, well, what email do you have? It's my email. I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, what do you sign into? I sign into my computer. I'm like, okay, this is not.
Yeah,
exactly.
And
not
so,
everybody, not everybody is tech savvy.
Yeah, exactly. So we make sure you're communicating to your school. And the other thing is, as a parent, is just like try it ahead of time. What I'm doing is doing tests.
Yes.
Like if I'm gonna have a parent on Zoom, I'm like, let's just do a 5-minute test and run to make sure this is set up. Especially if you have a child, you're gonna be doing therapy with the child, and you have the child.
Yeah, do an hour or so early, or like my son teachers send the homework on Saturdays. I know how to use Zoom, but for a couple of them that some friends of mine, they don't. I said, say play with it on the weekend. So don't wait till Monday. Wait, do it on Saturday and Sundays and play with it, and figure it out, because most of them, my son's teachers, they send videos on how to open a Zoom. She actually made the videos, because some people just don't get it. I mean, their device is different. They just don't understand. And then most of the kids that have special needs, they can't log in themselves. Like my son doesn't know how to log in to a computer and cut it on and click any buttons to go on Zoom. I have to do that for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an important point.
Okay, number 5, the school must hold a meeting at a time that is convenient for you. Most of the, from my personal experience, the teachers are asking me, Ms. Thomas, what time is it good for you? I'm giving them the times. If their slots are not filled, they're putting me in those slots. And if they are, we're working together as a team to say, hey, this is convenient for my family and for my child. So make sure the school is doing that. And again, the only difference is the location. Everything else stays the same. And Michael, can you chime in on this one? I believe that this is to be true, especially for Virginia, but just make sure that I'm not saying anything that maybe this is not all the way around. If you find out that a team member is not present, discuss with the team and decide if you will allow them to be absent for the meeting, and that the input and their input for their students, because they're saying that the IEP meetings are still the same. So
right.
if
Sabrina, just to cut in, you can waive the attendance, and I often do that. Tell parents, especially like the general education teacher, usually it's no big deal.
Okay.
But you don't have to do it in writing. You can do it orally.
Okay, you can. Okay. All right. So that's number 5. Thanks for the clarification, Michael. Number 6, you should have, and I think we went over this already, you should have the same documents in advance of your virtual IEP meeting as you would as an in-person meeting. Number 7, during the meeting, prepare notes, and I always tell parents to do this, prepare notes and be ready to talk about your concerns. Don't wait until the IEP meeting, until you get on the call to actually do that. Parents should be reviewing the IEP prior, as they would if it was an in-person meeting, and getting your notes and your concerns ready, and make sure all the paperwork is in place so you can stay focused.
Yeah, writing down notes is so important. I live with this notebook. Like I go through so many of these notebooks. Like I go through probably like 2 of them a month. I write down everything. Yeah. I'm like the wrong person if you're like, hey, you never called me. I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, let me look. I did on February 9th at 9:30 p.m. I called you. We spoke for 7 minutes, and you told me that you're.
Oh, you got the minutes and everything down.
I take really detailed notes on everything. So, but as a parent, don't think you're going to remember everything you want to ask. You're not. It's like going to a doctor's appointment. Right? We always write down what you want to ask them.
Yeah.
You'll forget. And especially it can be emotional in an IEP meeting. And sometimes even just getting the results of assessments, sometimes parents get those at an IEP meeting. It can be very emotional.
Especially these virtual ones.
Just know that if you don't have everything written down, you may not even be emotionally in the place to remember and ask for it. So.
Okay, this number 8, decide what services are most important to your student to prevent him or her from falling too far behind. Remember, a free, appropriate public education is still required, but you still want to be reasonable during this top crisis. And that's what we talked about, being flexible. That's how I'm being reasonable. Okay, it's like you said, 20 minutes for my son's speech therapy, but technically he was only probably getting 20 minutes anyway. Because with the notes changing and logging, and coming into the class, it probably was the same. But some parents I've been talking to, they're not really trying to be flexible. They want their 3 week, they want the 3 days, they want an hour, and it's just not working out, and that's causing a lot of frustration within the household, and with the special education team as well. But we still need to be reasonable. Number 9, remember, and I think we discussed this already, no changes to an IEP can be made without your consent. If you do not agree with the changes, you do not have to sign that. Yep.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're not gonna change it and say, well, you're outvoted, even though the parent is still a member of the IEP team.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michael, can you talk a little bit about pendency in this case? I know, like, a lot of times, if a parent cannot agree on a new IEP, the old IEP will go into a pendency, pending a hearing or pending an agreement. Michael, can you talk to parents in detail about what a pendency is? And
pendency is not really an issue right now for the coronavirus, but what it means is, in normal circumstances, if the school district wants to change the child's placement and the parent disagrees, they can file for a due process hearing, and it invokes something called pendency, where the child stays in the last agreed upon placement while the pendency of the hearing, until a hearing officer determines the case or the parents in the district come to a resolution.
Gotcha. Perfect.
But nobody's really changing placements during this time.
Right. But does that, like, is it only placement, or is it, for example, like services? So let's just say a child was getting 20 hours of ABA therapy, which is not unusual. From going to first grade to second grade, the school district said, you know what, we're going to cut it back to 10 hours, and the parent disagreed with the hours cut. I've seen kids' services freeze at that 20 hours until the due process hearing as well. So can it?
Right, you can do it that way too. That's a little less common, but it is done.
Okay, perfect. So
I usually try to resolve it without going to a hearing for a service, not a placement.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. And number 10, I always let inform parents to make sure that they follow up after the meeting with an email to the teachers and CC the principal or the whatever whoever is the special education coordinator, which most of the time is the principal or assistant principal for that particular team.
Okay.
Number 11, if you agree to temporary changes in the IEP, make sure that those changes only last while school is closed. This is something that my special education, Omar's homeroom teacher actually said to me the first day they started the IEP virtually. Well, not even just IEPs, just started virtually teaching kids virtually. She said, basically anything that we do now, it's just like the 20 minutes. This is pre-COVID-19. This is not something that you're gonna get moving forward. Right after when everything is over and said and done, you're gonna go back to your 30 minutes that you're supposed to get, or hour, or 45 minutes. But if they're changing it and reducing it, they're letting you know this is temporarily. And actually, she sent me a document, and I signed it. I e-signed it and sent it back, and she said she's going to put it in my files, stating just that these are pre-COVID things we're doing now, just to get through the crisis. And then once it's over, we're going to go back to the original IEP that you actually had in place.
Gotcha.
Okay. Number 12. If you know that the services for your student, if you know the services your student had before COVID-19, keep track of his or her services during the pandemic. Track their progress, the materials and instructions. Make sure that you record, make sure you ask how to record the data. Now that's a question I had from Michael. How is the school recording the data during this time?
I don't know if I could answer that.
Yeah.
That's a question
I can answer that. Is that we're recording it the same way. So the same way that, like I said earlier, is that whenever a service is given to a child, you're required to document the date, time you started, the date, what the IEP goals that you worked on were, what the child's progress is. Now, I'm an ancillary provider, so I'm doing ABA therapy. I'm not a special, I'm not working in a classroom. I am a special education, but I'm not working in a classroom. But the same way that services were documented before, they're still being documented the exact same way. And providers and teachers are required to document what they're doing. So it should be all documented in terms of.
Now, I can understand the documentation part, but the progress part is questionable, because how do you document how I'm progressing teaching my son when I don't really know what I'm doing?
Right. So it would then be, like I said, part of the documentation, the paperwork is, at least for me in New Jersey, where I'm providing ABA services, is I actually have to write a note on how the student's progressing towards each IEP goal. So if the IEP, after every session when I'm working on, so if I'm assigned as an ABA therapist to work on the goal, the child will be able to ask for 10 different items. Every time I work with that child, I'm required to say, let's just say, Michael, today Michael and I worked on requesting while he was watching iPad videos via tele-therapy, and 7 out of 10 times that I gave him the opportunity to request, he said the word on, and 3 times I prompted it. So I'm writing that detailed level of notes. Okay. I don't know, classroom teachers, they may not be keeping trial by trial data. I think it's gonna determine on a child.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of referring to. And I asked his teacher that, and she says this week it's going to be different, but the weeks before, I mean, they're looking at the homework, but you really can't track because you don't know how the mother or if the
you don't know how the parent did. A lot of it's just going to be parent report, and but parent report is a valid form of data. Mm-hmm. So when I ask, when I'm submitting notes, it asks me what assessment tools I'm using, and parent report is usually one of them. So I'll state that I asked the parent. And so I can only assume the parent's telling the truth, and they would obviously have no reason to lie. Whereas if I'm working with the child that is, I'm helping them on homework and independence, and the parent says to me, I asked the parent, this math worksheet, did you do this with him or did he do it by himself? And okay, I did it with him. Okay, well, what level of independence did he do it? Did he do it and then you checked it? Did you sit problem by problem with him? And I'll just put a notation in there. So I think teachers are doing the best they can to document it. And I know for me, I'm actually being more diligent than ever about documentation.
Yes.
Especially because the parents are not there. And so whereas if I'm working face-to-face with the parent and the parent's participating in that session, then I know the parent knows exactly how the child did because they're sitting next to me. Whereas I don't always see the parent. So I'm actually recording things a lot more diligently to make sure that I can really demonstrate to a parent what I'm doing if they were to look at the notes.
Okay. And number 13, you still have the right to disagree. Of course, we talked about that with the services. You can tell the school about your concerns, and they can have the prior written notice. If they do not do it, your concerns. Wait a minute. If they don't do it, send the concerns in writing after the IEP. Then ask that your letter be placed in the student's record to preserve rights for later on. I think we discussed that in a little bit detailed earlier. I have a question about this. I'm not sure if Michael can answer this question, but if you think your student needs ESY or some kind of compensatory education, we discussed that, you can ask the IEP meeting to be held as soon as the school reopens. And if it opens in the summer, you can do that. Michael, a question about that. So we talked about the seniors. So that wouldn't apply to the seniors. Do you know if it applies to the seniors? Now my son's in 12th grade, but he's not graduating to 2 years from now.
Unclear.
So it wouldn't apply if he was supposed to be a graduate of 2020.
Unclear. I think it's unclear at this point.
Okay, it's unclear. Okay.
Given
so that's
that,
out there.
normally we would have an answer, but unfortunately because of the pandemic, I think we're kind of left in it's not a very clear. We don't have definitive guidance on that.
Okay.
I think that unfortunately a lot of these things there's not going to be really clear answers until somewhere takes it to a court.
And I'm going to say something that sucks, but it's the reality. I think the class of 2020 relative to others is going to get screwed a little bit and end up on the short end.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael. I definitely agree with you on that.
I think, and that's just a matter of timing. If you just happen to be born in 2002, it just kind of worked out badly for you generally because of this pandemic that you're turning 18 this year.
I just had a moment when I thought of the fact that people that were born in 2002 graduated high school this year. I was in high school in 2002, so I had a moment there, but I'm recovering, and we're going to go to the next slide.
That's right. That's right. Okay. The bottom line is, keep in touch with the teachers, be flexible. Make sure that you're taking breaks, not just for the child, the parent too, need to take mental breaks throughout the day. I tell my clients, don't be so hard on yourself, because at the bottom line, the kids need us to be parents, not teachers at this point. We're not teachers. We're doing crisis work, crisis IEP, crisis homework, and just be flexible with the teachers. Plan your day ahead. Just like I said, my son does Monday, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I make sure he gets up in the morning, he takes a shower, he eats, and he's ready to go to work at 9 o'clock and jump on the computer. Make sure your day is planned so you're not frustrated and all over the place. And again, like I said, remember your child needs you to be a parent, not their teacher. And don't be so hard on yourself. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well, and everybody's having some kind of self-care, so we can get things together.
Sorry about that, guys. I'm trying to figure out how to mute myself on Zoom, but the controls are hidden. The mail has arrived in my house, which my dog he always announces the mail.
Look, no excuses. This is crisis stuff. This is real life. This is what we're doing nowadays, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a parent and you have children at home and you're trying to do calls and they're driving you nuts, this is real life. We're working at I do my best. I have my professional lights and my white background, but in my house,
Jessica, I'm praying.
So I think that's a perfect.
Jessica, I purposely I purposely made sure I let my grandbaby run around all morning, so when I could jump on this call, he would be asleep, and he just woke up. So this is real life. This is how it is.
Yeah, exactly, guys. This is it. This is what it looks like in 2020 to have.
Yes. We got to be flexible.
And I was going to add to what Sabrina was saying. Remember, as much as it's an adjustment for you, it's an adjustment for the school district too.
Exactly, Michael.
They're trying to do what they can. They didn't plan for this either.
And you know what? You think about it, Michael, that is so true, because they're trying to teach our kids, and they got their own kids and their own families and husbands within their household at the same time, you know? So everybody has to be flexible and show some kindness and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you had a couple parting thoughts, Sabrina.
Your virtual IEP meetings will be difficult, will be different, but they do not have to be difficult.
Absolutely. And that's your contact information. We're going to have everyone's contact information, my contact info, Michael's and Sabrina's, all in the comments of this video. Look, as a parent, nothing right now about the situation is perfect. And you see it from my house, right? If this is take 2 of the meeting, it is what it is. But just know, as a parent, you're doing your best. And
that's right.
Especially if you watch this video all the way to the end, you're doing the best thing you can for your child. I mean, most people wouldn't be doing that. So I want to commend you. You're an amazing parent, and your child is going to be okay. This may be a challenging time, but it will pass.
It's a challenging time for everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And everything will work out.
That's
so
right.
Thank you so much for everyone who jumped on. Just a reminder, if you seeing this at the end and next time you want to come, I have actually time scheduled. I haven't announced the dates yet. I have developmental pediatricians coming on. I have biomedical intervention specialists coming on. And if you only way to get the access to the webinars and ask the professionals your questions is if you're on my list. So head over to Hope Education Services. That's a free service I provide for anyone who's on my list. So just jump on there, and next time you'll get to come on and ask your questions. Thank you so much, Michael and Sabrina, for coming on here.
Thank you, Jessica.
Really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Jessica.